Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great meeting you in person, because this is how we meet in person nowadays, over Zoom, right? So why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Wonderful. Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I love conversations. I think, as an interaction designer, or
It's not a Greek thing. It's not because it's not.
that too, right? we invented conversation and dialogue.
That's right.
And I always say the midwifery technique is the best way to bring people get ideas to be born. So I would just say that's what I do. I get ideas to be born and then find ways to realize them. I run a company, a consulting agency called Principled Design. I call myself a designer, which is a very ambiguous term. It took me many, many years to make peace with that. I would go through, customs, and then they say, what is your profession? Designer. Oh, you make clothes. So, well, actually, I also make clothes with a lot of technology in them. So it's one of those very amorphous and ever-changing terms. But fundamentally, yes, I think, and I work as a designer. However, my work is always at the intersection of design, technology, engineering, and people. So bring together people, processes.
You can't forget the people part. That's kind of important.
And we do so very often. So just to situate it, because it's important in the way that I work, my first master's was in philosophy, and not just because of Greek. And the second one was in interaction.
That was the degree I was going for until I switched to economics. But I was going for a philosophy degree, and I thought to myself, what am I going to do with this? But it's actually been very useful throughout my entire life.
I find exactly the same. So then I got very much involved with wearables before the term even existed. So the majority of my work, my big projects, have been around wearables. However, what I do really is bring what I'd like to call appropriate technology to bear. So a big project I did with a friend was in Afghanistan, where we developed a toolkit for artisans. And that was a book, because that was the appropriate technology, but our process, how we got there, the iteration, the co-creation, were all principles that I bring in as a designer, who again is very, very much involved in technology and what technology can do and can we imagine it to be. So right now I'm also writing a book called The Softness of Things, Technology in Space and Form, which is based on a class I taught at NYU. I've been teaching at NYU for the past 19 years as an adjunct. And it occurred to me after many years that, oh my God, this is really my design methodology. And I've had students come to me a decade later, said, oh my God, Despina, that class changed my life. Or when I embark on a project, I always think of how did we do it there? So I thought, okay, it's time to put it together, since I think we're also in a very interesting place with technology and where we will go. It's a very interesting, urgent, critical, and really exciting time to work in this field.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that you call yourself a designer, because that's one of those things that's so malleable to everybody. It depends on who you're talking to as to what it is. They'll say, oh, you do websites, or are you a UX designer, or like, but if you're beyond that, how do you get people to understand that it's a little broader than simply visuals?
That's such a great question. And I have to admit, I really struggle with that, especially because, as I said, my body of work is so diverse. My very first project, I was a research fellow at Interval Research in your neck of the woods. And I did a really big project for Christie's, which was organizational transformation. So how do you bring this all together? So the closest I can say is I'm a design strategist, but it still doesn't capture it, because it's the work we do is by default inter and transdisciplinary. Sometimes I call myself an engineer whisperer, because I can get engineers to do things that they always say, no, we can do that. Well, what if we reframe it and we think of it differently? So maybe another term.
Do you mind if I use that term? Because I feel like I could do that as well.
Right? Absolutely, please. So I do struggle, and it's usually a 10-minute conversation. It's only after I describe some of the projects that I've done that oh, okay, now. And that's also one of the reasons that the majority of the work I do is really word of mouth. You know, like I meet someone at a conference and we start talking, or they see other work that I've done and they say, oh, I think maybe you can be helpful to our organization. And a lot of the projects that I've involved in, I think of them as props to get conversations started. So I did a wonderful project with an amazing, actually molecular engineer, material engineer at Lubrizol. They're a big company. They make polymers, they engineer polymers. And even though the end product was, you know, a jacket, the process to make that jacket, because they don't make products, they make plastic pellets.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you communicate in your organization or to your customers what your capabilities are? So it was really a deep dive, meeting with all the department heads, understanding what they have that could be applicable for flexible electronics and wearables. And so even though, and then of course they have an amazing demo piece that, you know, 4 years later, it's still outside the office of the president and everybody loves it, because suddenly the intangible becomes tangible. And in the process, you get connections between departments, and you really have innovation in action. And I really insist, both with my work and with my students, that you have to make it. I don't care how. It could be made out of cardboard. It could be made out of, you know, paper clips and duct tape, but you have to give it form.
Yep.
So then you can be critical about it, and you can see what, you know, you can find the cracks. And plus, mobilize people.
It's interesting you should say that, because it's almost like you have a portfolio, right? You're an artist and you have a portfolio, and they're all different kinds of things. It's not just artwork, it's physical objects and all sorts of different things. So it's a very, and if you think about it, most human beings are complex just like that. But for some reason, everyone wants a simple explanation of what you do, right? So when you're talking to somebody, they go, oh, what's your elevator pitch? Or what do you do? Or if you can't explain to me in 30 seconds what you do, then I don't want to talk to you. It's like, no. Human beings are way more complicated than that. You have to understand that there's a lot of depth there, and you can't really communicate it in a 30-second elevator pitch.
I couldn't agree more. And I think in the past, especially, maybe it's now 15 years, with this whole, the elevator pitch, the Twitter feed, your tagline on LinkedIn, if you cannot encapsulate it, you don't exist. But we lose so much nuance and so much, exactly as you said, depth and complexity. And we are complex. And I think we want to remain complex.
Oh yeah, exactly. But the problem is, how do you express the complexity to somebody without having that sort of sit down, face-to-face, word of mouth, one-on-one conversation with somebody? Because I've had that situation where, you know, you talk to somebody and they're like, oh, okay, I don't understand. But then once you actually get face-to-face with them and you discuss it with them, and they understand sort of the depth of, you make that actual human connection, then they get it, right? And they go, oh, okay, I see. But it's kind of like, that's not what our world is designed to be, has been turned into. It's more of a get it done quick and forget about anything but low-hanging fruit. And can you help me right now get this specific thing done?
Yeah, and I think absolutely, and it's a combination of that and the attention economy, that people have a very small, short attention span, and that we want everything done yesterday. And exactly as you said, the low-hanging fruit, which we know what the result is. You know, you get what you pay for. You get the low-hanging fruit, and we don't go deeper. Although, of course, that's more of maybe a hope, but I see a bit of a shift where people are drawn more and more into long-form text and into really finding that complexity. But that could also be, you know, my self-selected group or my hope. And like, I think everything, and historically we will have both. I don't think it's either or, but I hope we will gonna start tilting a little bit more to that, a more in-depth, because the other thing is we are dealing increasingly with complex problems, or you know, what as designers would call wicked problems, that they don't have a right or wrong solution. There is not. And those problems, whether it is climate change or the political division that we're encountering, they need interdisciplinarity, they need complexity, they need to map the system, map the opportunities, map the tools, and see where the leverage point, again, to use a systems-based language, are. And this cannot be done in 5 minutes or even 5 weeks. So I think as we will realize that the way to get out or to address, because again, solving is I don't think we can solve them. It's how efficiently and effectively can we address some of the challenges that we're encountering, maybe will show us that we do need a systems-based approach, which demands complexity and a deeper thinking.
Yeah, but the question is, how do you get to those deeper conversations without just having these one-on-one connections? Because it's got the like I said, like we meet over Zoom. You know, if I'm in New York, I'll come see you. We'll go have a drink or something. But the chances of that, I mean, we're all so remote now. I mean, it almost seems like we really need to redo our tools or something so that we can reestablish that same kind of connection that we used to have. And then we can get to the deeper issues because people get a better understanding of what people are like.
What a great, I completely agree. And it's interesting because, you know, like with the fact that we're doing this on Zoom and it's so normal, I don't think we would have been as normal 5 years ago or before the pandemic. Okay, with podcasts, yes, maybe. But now, you know, I have clients that they're in New York and we mostly on Zoom. And we definitely lose something. On the other hand, I was in Greece over Christmas for a month. Which I couldn't have
I was in Greece for a month in October. So
let me know next time you go.
Yeah.
We can have that drink in Greece.
Definitely.
With better weather. So I couldn't have done that. So this ability to be remote, to, you know, the new digital nomads. So we gain, we lose. But I think you're making an excellent point in terms of how do we redesign our tools. You know, I always, when I have sometimes I'm meeting with, or when we had class on Zoom, sometimes I would say, yes, you, and I would imagine that the person could see me. And I thought, oh, why isn't there a tool on Zoom that it can track which window you're looking at and that person knows that you're looking at them, right?
Yeah, it's coming.
So I'm sure it's coming. So things like that. So how do we look at, and of course, I don't think so. And again, maybe that's more of a hope. I don't think we can ever replicate the face-to-face experience because we're biologically designed over hundreds of thousands of years to take on cues that we don't even know we're taking on. And you know, you smell, scent, like small gestures, move that just
body language, anything happening below.
Exactly. How do you know? Do you shake your foot?
That's right. Is my leg shaking? Have I crossed my legs? You know.
Right. Am I losing attention? So all those things that we're not even aware that we're processing. You know, the precognitive, the unthought environment, which it will take. I think we will never be able to engineer those tools, or even if we do, it's not going to be in my lifetime. So how do we make this transition more efficient? How do we have interaction designers, engineers? And again, that's my big, how do we get engineers and designers to really work together and not have the technology and what's possible drive the design? Because I think we're still there. We're still at that level, even though I've been talking about it for 25 years and people have been talking about that even before me. I think still the processes are separate for many reasons. But, you know, this would be a week-long conversation and maybe we can upon some of those issues. But, and that's why I bring back this notion of conversation and conversation theory and what the early cyberneticians taught us with and then we moved to the second order feedback loops with, you know, suddenly people talk about cybernetics again, which is really interesting because for a good 30 years, it was quite dead. And now people are reviving these conversations because we see that we realize that we need this complexity of systems, interdisciplinarity, and this understanding of the second order feedback loops and the biological, because, you know, the early cyberneticians, you had neurologists, you had psychologists, you had anthropologists. So to bring those disciplines back in and really embed them into interaction design and not just, okay, let's put 10 stickies up and do a little ethnographic research, but really go into talk with biologists, talk with evolutionary psychologists, and understand, okay, how do we now deal with this new environment, and how do we bring back or introduce some of the qualities in our tools so we don't lose all that depth that we have been trained to respond to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminded me of something I read somewhere. I forget where it was, but they were talking about how we as human beings really haven't evolved from the individuals that we were thousands of years ago. And we're doing all these things that are very unnatural to us, like driving in a car, going faster than walking speed, getting in an airplane. It's like all these things that are, I think they were talking about how it actually it's almost traumatizing, because we're doing these things that are really unnatural to our bodies, but we're trying to rationalize that they're normal now because this is the world that we live in. So there's a disconnect between our humanity and the world we live in, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, especially with like ChatGPT and things like that, where people are saying, oh, this is going to take over all of our jobs and things like that. So we seem to be dehumanizing the world, and it's kind of a sad, we're going in a sad direction, but it's good to hear that there are some sort of sprigs of hope here and there where we're starting to bring the human back into the equation.
Yes, I absolutely think that's absolutely correct. I mean, first of all, I see it with my students where they do have almost a nostalgia. Well, actually, not almost, a nostalgia for the past.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring that awareness in the work. And these are, future, either they're going to make their own companies or they're going to work in the GAFAs of the world, in Google and Amazon, they're going to, and so I hope that sensibility and desire for connection will come to bear. And of course, we also we hear every day in the news, and I think we see it in our environment, you have more and more people with really debilitating mental health issues. So this is also something that we need to address. And we have now enough research to know that this world of social media and the dopamine kick is only contributing to that. So how do we just kind of reverse that and start introducing and think about humanities? And for so long we talked about STEM and how important it is to have STEM education, but I think we need to start talking about how important it is to have humanities education.
Exactly.
And bring, I don't know what the acronym would be, I'm not, but you have to bring the two to come together, because we are now working at deep fundamental issues of what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. This question that that many of the questions that we had as philosophy students, that they were what they would be called thought experiments. Now they're not thought experiments; they are how we live. The most famous question you have in Ethics 101, when they teach you about the different types of ethics, is you drive a train or a car, and if you veer to the left, you kill a mother with a pram, and if you veer to the right, you kill a bus with full of octogenarians.
Yeah, the trolley problem, right? The trolley problem.
Right. So now it's a real problem. It's something has coded in. And I remember I had this conversation, now it's over 10 years ago, with an engineer who was working at autonomous vehicles. And he said, no, but this would never happen. The car will know it's programmed to never engage in an accident. Of course, we know that's not the case.
Exactly.
So now we have to code this ethics into tools and machines and systems, or what is a human, or this conversation, does a machine have consciousness? Which to me, that's not the interesting question. The interesting question is, what is consciousness? And how
because we haven't even figured that out yet. I mean, how can we say it's conscious?
Right. I mean, that's an open, again, one of the oldest questions in philosophy books. So, but what's interesting in our interactions with the machine, those questions get clarified, and they're pushing us to ask them in a much more critical and embodied and personal way. It's no longer a thought experiment. It's, how do you deal with your phone, with ChatGPT, just with what is prediction? What is the difference between prediction and anticipation? How do we fold the two together? What's creativity, originality, authenticity? So I think it's a very exciting time for philosophy.
Oh, it's very, very
Uh,
exciting. I think we should bring it back as I always thought, in fact, I wrote a blog post on this a while back. We should have chief philosophy officers, like CPOs in these organizations that will actually, advise people on just, and I think it came out of the VW scandal. Like, where are the philos, I guess you could call
yeah.
them. We need those in the
Can
organizations.
maybe that I will change my
Chief
like
philosophy
you asked
officer.
me, instead of saying, well, I'm a design strategist and researcher, I say I'm a chief philosophy officer. I like it. I love it. Thank you.
We need somebody like that in the C-suite, really, because
Yeah.
it seems like we've veered off, not just on the ethical front, it's like on many, many fronts
Yeah.
as to where we're going.
Yeah, and I
But
think that it has to do with this accelerationism, where and acceleration in general, our technologies are moving so much faster than our ability to process it from a policy point of view, from an ethics point of view, from education point of view, and that's why a lot of these institutions are in crisis,
mhm,
because when and that's where also the value comes in. I mean, half of the things that are taught in many even graduate schools you can learn on YouTube.
oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I've heard stories of students going to class and not learning anything and just watching it and getting all of their information from YouTube because there's something about the instructor they didn't like or the lecture
Yeah.
was boring or whatever. So, I mean, education, don't talk about education. That needs disruption in a huge way.
Huge way, huge.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you then bring in the human element, conversation, criticality, the network that you learning how to work with others, how to collaborate, how to assess what is real information and what it's not. That's where education really has a role. So it's
exactly.
to as you absolutely disrupt and rethink what is it that we're teaching, which means a deep dive in what values do we have that we feel are worth perpetuating and
Yeah.
sharing.
We should just teach people how to learn and then let them go learn whatever they want on their own.
Yeah,
That might be the way to do it. But the
yeah,
thing with GPT, I think is interesting is that it's every time I've worked with it, I seem like it just feels like a mirror to humanity. It's just a mirror to us. All it's doing is sort of regurgitating what we did. So it's not really creating anything new. But then some people say, well, that's how we create new things. We take building blocks of previous things and slap them together in a new way. And we go, aha, here's something new. I mean, do you think that it'll ever, I mean, recently, I don't know if you played with it recently, but do you think it's
yeah.
actually doing anything that's even remotely all that interesting?
Um, of course, it's an amazing engineering feat.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's extremely interesting how, but I find what's more interesting is the desire for it to be something more than it is. It's
Mm.
really an amazing synthesizer. It's a
Yeah.
very smart synthesizer.
Yeah.
Now, the issues, though, as you very well pointed out, and there were so many researchers, the first that comes to mind is Kate Crawford. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She's a researcher at Microsoft, and she was co-founder of an institute, AI Now, at NYU. I think she's no longer there. And she's written this book, Atlas of AI,
Mm.
and she's just one of many that pointed the obvious, that what is happening with all these technologies, with machine learning, artificial intelligence, and now with ChatGPT, is that all the biases and all the misinformation that we have created only gets amplified.
That's right. Exactly right.
So misogyny, racism, you name it.
But
Because
I have a theory behind that, but just go ahead. I mean, let me
no,
hear your.
please. So we this is so going back to, we're still nowhere near general artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
Nowhere near, definitely not in my lifetime, and I would even give it a much longer timeline than that, because again, we're complex, and because we have so many sensors and senses, and then you bring memory, and then you bring emotion, and then it becomes increasingly so. I'm not, as you might have guessed, a reductionist. Or
Mhm.
so yeah, so I think, but it's what's fascinating, and that's to me, I don't have the right answer. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Is that it's like we have now AI is the hammer, and everything is a nail. boom,
Hmm.
boom, boom,
Hmm.
we're gonna fix everything. Would I for a second say that it's not amazing what it's doing in drug research and in medicine in general, or optimizing energy grids? Absolutely. But we seem to think that it's going to solve everything, and that it's valuable for everything. So yeah, I think it's fun and interesting. And I think that, like as you said, the more you play with it, it's also, what I find interesting is the probes that you put in. It really helps you think of, okay, what do I really want to give it as a
Exactly.
prompt?
Hmm.
But it's, yeah, as I said, I think it's an incredibly smart and well-designed synthesizer, but it opens up a huge area of critical concern, which I'm sure you've all had other people talk about as well, in terms of, as I said, perpetuating, and not only perpetuating, solidifying the biases that we have and the injustices that we have
Yeah.
built our society in.
Well,
And of
I have a
the,
theory on that, but go ahead.
and the misinformation, which is very truly scary.
Yeah. So my theory is this: is that all these bots that are trained on public things like Twitter or whatever, the reason why they are the way they are is because human beings aren't really portraying their true selves on social media, right? They're doing things purposely to try and gain attention. So they're saying racist things, they're outraged, blah blah blah. So they're creating this persona of humanity, which is incorrect. It's not what people are really like in person, because some of those things you see online, you would never say to somebody in person,
Yeah.
never. So if the AI is using that as part of its training set, no wonder it's turning into a racist, homophobic jerk. Is because we are telling it to be like that, because we are acting like that so that we can gain attention online. So if we used real human conversation that people would be talking in person, then we'd get a much different impression. I think the AI would get a very, very different view of what humanity was like.
What an interesting, that's a really interesting thought.
Mm.
And again, and I guess part of it is the Alexa model, right? Where they do actually take in a lot of anonymized conversations, but you're touching on something really interesting and compelling. And I think that's where, again, it's the kind of the mental model, and how do you think of these technologies as collaborators,
Yeah.
as opposed to as solution providers?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting. I'd love to think about that more. How do we bring in those inputs and that natural environments and settings?
Yeah. So it just made me think, it's kind of like Dan O'Reilly's predictably irrational, where he says that people will just lie on surveys if they don't know
Yeah.
what the answer is. So I think people will communicate in bizarre ways that are not like themselves online, and just to try and gain attention. And I think that's kind of it's a sad thing, but it seems like humanity has become a whole bunch of people who are just, all we're doing is screaming for attention. Right? It's like we do things to grab attention. And do you think that, I mean, it's obviously not a good thing, but it seems like that's where everyone's going. It's like, if I don't do anything that gets any attention, I'm very sad and I sit in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was talking to a friend, I used to think that I should take a course on just to augment my skills on coding, but now I think I should get a course on LinkedIn, how to
Yeah.
make myself more visible on LinkedIn. So it doesn't matter what you do, it's how you promote what you do. And the famous influence,
Exactly.
the whole
But
influence.
I have this theory that there's somebody up there turning the dials. They're like, okay, let's turn this dial up. Let's turn this person down. Let's turn it. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. Because, I mean, I've posted things on LinkedIn that have gotten, hundreds of thousands of views, and then I posted things that have 0 views, and there seems to be no differentiation between them. It's like, who's turning the dials here?
I think again, it's just some really messed up algorithm, and
Yeah, probably.
that's where, when you have algorithms doing social engineering without having a very limited worldview,
Yeah,
that's what, and it becomes a little bit and it's impossible to get, I think, an algorithm that has all the inputs because that you would need, because then that's a human.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
because it becomes like the map of the world, I teach at NYU, and they moved to a new building, and we changed the system, and now we have a class that we 5 people co-teach, and for some strange reason this semester we're in 2 different floors, which means I'm not gonna, we have our separate classes, but we met before class, we met during the break, we met after class. And so the algorithm that set up that floor distribution didn't have that into account, because how many checkbooks are you going to have in order to configure something, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
another example of how we just let go of that social engineering and interaction, like the fountain example of where you get the best ideas being born. How do we bring in? I think we're having a very critical conversation around what it is that we're trying to accomplish and what is efficiency, because that's the other thing. On the other hand, you have the attention span, the attention economy, and then this efficiency, that everything has to be optimized and efficient, and to the degree that often becomes inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's always we always want to get to the end instead of enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
And I think we've become more like that now. It's like, I think the one I was reading was about video games. So it used to be when you were playing a video game, you'd explore the world and figure it out and go through the puzzles. And now people just watch Twitch to see how to get there as quickly as possible, complete this task, and move on. It's like, no. It's the journey as well, not just the destination.
Which it's interesting, though, because at the same time we've seen, and maybe for that very reason, such a great increase in interest in mindfulness, in meditation, which also has become the, what is it called? The well-being economy, or there's a term.
Yeah. There's a whole economy that's come out of it. Yeah.
And again, it becomes a goal in its own. I'm gonna meditate so I can feel better and I can work harder. No, but
that's right. I heard Google fired a bunch of yoga instructors, or massage therapists, I think it was. Oh my.
So yeah, we've made quite an interesting place for ourselves, but at the same time, as long as we have the ability to converse with humans and share ideas, I think we're going to be okay.
Oh yeah, but we need to do more of that. In fact, that's the one thing that I did a study when I was going through my Stanford class about the working from home versus working in the office. And the only thing that we realized was missing was serendipity, right? I mean, you bump into somebody and they would have a conversation and blah, blah, blah. And at that point we said, oh, it's not that important. But I'm changing my opinion on that now. I think serendipity is ultimately important, because if you think about it, that's where most of our new ideas come from, is these chance occurrences where people bump into each other. And because of the way we're all remote and everything, it's very rare to have those kind of serendipitous encounters.
Absolutely, because everything is much more structured. It's much more goal oriented. It has an agenda. Yeah. Again, you only use this part of yourself. You're not having the touch, which is so important. I mean, we know what happens to animals when you separate, where they don't get touched enough. They become depressed or really anxious or really aggressive. And we are touched and having this hug that you see a friend or in the corridor less and less and less and less, and especially while at the same time people tend to live in bigger communities. They don't have so many people in their household, so you have the inbuilt loneliness, and then you don't have someone to just give you a hug because you had a good day or because you had a bad day, either. So,
and of course, now when you try to hug people, because I'm a hugger, I like hugging people, and they're all like, COVID, stay away. I can't even. This is I do a shut up and write meetup, and I just want to shake the guy's hand, and it's still, he's like, oh.
Yeah, I'm a big hugger too, and between COVID and being politically
Listen, I've got
correct.
a good immune system. It's all right. We should all work on our immune systems.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we had a bit of a, I mean, it's a confluence between COVID and this new technologies being rolled out at a really increasingly dizzying pace without us being able to catch up. But as I said, I can get into dark moments and think, oh, what, but and that's one of the main reasons I teach, because it's really wonderful to meet younger people, and some are very doom and gloom, but for the most part, they just are so excited about ideas, about what can be. And I find part of my role, I think, is to keep that excitement and make them believe that they are responsible. A few years ago, I taught a class on future predictions, which is, I know we're going to get to that, and it's a full parent, but
My favorite stuff.
Right? Future scenarios. And, I think when we say they have done, they is the future you. So you want to be in those positions of power or decision making at various levels, but you have a choice of what kind of job you're going to get, how you're going to do it, how you're going to conduct yourself, how you're going to collaborate, what values you bring into the tools that you're creating. And I think that's really, really important. And that's why, again, making things is so critical. Because in the abstract, you don't really come face to face with those decision points and then just kind of like map out what will the effect of it be.
No, I have this feeling that and I think that I thought about this a couple of years ago, that there's going to be a backlash against the virtual. And I mean, you heard it I think I read just yesterday that Microsoft they let go all of the AR, XR, MR staff because, it's not there yet. The metaverse, where Facebook is putting all their power into, it's not here. And I don't think people are going to want to be there yet. And in fact, I think we're seeing a backlash against the digital. We're seeing a backlash against the virtual. People want the real experiences again. Are you seeing that as well?
100%. 100%. For all the comfort of the digital nomads, and it's greater, I see it. First of all, I don't want to. I'm trying to always say I'm technology agnostic, and I'm really interested in technology, and I get very excited. But VR, honestly, and I know there's some amazing uses, again, in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, anorexia, really spectacular, which again makes you really think about the nature of the brain. But as a general category, I cannot think of one experience that I had in VR where I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Or I would rather, first of all, it's again the engineering that after 20 minutes your head hurts. I have a neck problem anyway, as we all do, between this and this. And like another heavy thing, but it's disembodied, and I think people really revel. And I see here in New York there are many more salons and networking events where people are having meals together. There is absolutely, I think, a desire for that. And I also don't think that the metaverse makes sense at this point where we at this juncture where we are. And I hope, frankly, it never will, because we have such an amazing world, and it's amazing to dance and walk with people and move and eat and share. There's a lot of information there.
Yeah, these dystopian worlds where we're stuck in a coffin and everything is like sense fed to us. It's terrible. I mean, it just seems so inhuman. It's like, what are humans turning into? And I mean, do you see people? I mean, I think people are realizing this, and I think the COVID actually helped bring people understanding that we really do like the face-to-face human interaction. Face-to-face human interaction is how we were designed, and we're still trying to step away from it, but we should be going more and more towards it, which is I'm glad we're seeing that.
I completely, and I would love to. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be wonderful if the energy that goes into VR and the metaverse would go in figuring out how to bring people closer together, how to have those serendipitous encounters. You know, one of the very first products I designed after school, which was a bit of an experiment, but then it had a bit of a small design cult following, was an LED on a very thin wire on a battery. That was 2000. So it was,
wow, you're ahead of your time.
and people would say, oh, what is it? And it was, the hardest part was finding a small factory to manufacture it. And I would say, okay, I want a really beautiful soldering joint. And they would say, oh, you mean a very robust? I said, no, a beautiful. And they would ask, what is this for? Is it a reading light? I said, no. What is it? And then I had big arguments with people. Should we write in the package how to use it? I'm like, I'm not going to tell people how to use the light. And then one of the uses was that if you wore a very, very tiny but very bright, with a very nice angle of light LED, and you went out and it was in orange, green, and white, it was an invitation for somebody to say, oh, what is this?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a conversation starter, and again, it was very simple, like the simplest, I call it like staple technology: battery, memory, like wrapping wire, which has a memory, and LED, which exists in every appliance, right? That you have to have. But now you take control of the technology. People say, oh, is it powered by your heartbeat, or is it powered by your heat? So, you know, when something is very simple and open, it's an invitation for a conversation, but also an invitation for dialogue and for imagination. So, you know, how do we design what, you know, I call technologies with social functionality, not just functionality? How do we bring this social functionality into the fold?
Yeah. And then where do you get those ideas from? I mean, do you just come up with it, or do you see something like that, or like where did that come from?
That's such a great idea. Question. That's a great idea. Where did it come from? In the case of the Mo, I mean, I was already working with wearables, and as we know, even today, 25 years later, wearables is a very, you know, I call it the edge case scenario, because of how many difficulties. The majority of them are on the supply chain and the manufacturing, and how, you know, the electronics, apparel are so divergent,
and still divergent, unfortunately.
But terribly so. So it was like the simplest thing that I could do that still had a little bit of that magic, right? My very first, how I got into wearables was as a graduate student at NYU, the same department where I teach now, the Interactive Telecommunications program. And for my thesis, I made a pair of jackets that communicated via infrared. But the idea was that there was only one-to-one. So I made 3 pairs, but they each had their own pair, their own mate. There was a riff on Plato's Symposium, how we all have our perfect other out in the world, and we're, you know, fantastic unity. The gods get pissed off because we don't care about them. They cut us in half, so we go around the world. So they had, and they still work. I used a basic stamp. I don't know how geeky or how far back your geekhood goes, and there's
pretty far back.
They still work. And, you know, I would go to Canal Street and scavenge headphone wire, because at the time was the only soft wire I could use to make my connections. And talking about serendipity, that's the idea. You wear it, you're out in the world, and all of a sudden, and because it works with infrared, it's a line of sight. You have to see the person. It's not somebody that you don't see. So there's certain magic in there. So in that case, the idea came, I was just reading about infrared communication. I was going through the basic stamp, which is a precursor to Arduino, the microcontroller. And I was reading at the different application notes, and I thought, infrared, how amazing that there is this spectrum that we cannot see, but it's laden with possibility. And becomes also a metaphor. How do we do communicate non-verbally, and we emit signals that, again, cognitively we're not aware of. So I first fell in love with the idea of infrared, and then I brought in my whole philosophy and my Greek Plato, and I thought, and it was and in a way that launched my career, because of that project. I was asked to join Interval, which was this amazing research lab, and then because of that, I worked at NCR, that they also had a wonderful lab in London called the Knowledge Lab, and they were looking at the future of banking, and so they really liked that graduate project, and they asked me to design a set of projects for them to think about the future. So we're doing a bracelet for kids to get them into banking early.
They have it now. I'll give your kid an Apple Watch, right?
Exactly. So it was a precursor to that, and we did, it was a precursor to ePay, and we did a flexible circuit that we did in. And at the time, again, engineers said, "You want us to inject mold over a flexible circuit? Impossible." I'm like, "We have a budget. Since here, try it."
Try it. Exactly.
Try
Like, try it is like my favorite phrase.
Yeah, try it. Okay, it's not going to work. We'll burn some money. We have the budget. But, I said, look, and it was, of course, it worked. And of course, now it's very standard. But
yeah.
So yeah, I just like trying things out. But so ideas come from sometimes the technology itself, I'm embarrassed to say, because I'm very concept driven. And when I get stuck, I go to the Met and I look at old artifacts. I always say,
there you go. See, serendipity occurs.
Yeah, exactly. And you just see something that you make some weird synaptic, unexpected connection in your brain, and there you go.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your students. So when you're talking to them, do you see that they're in their future? Do they see more social media apps to stick us to phones, or do you see actual people who are interested in solving the big problems that we have?
I would say it's 2/3. So 2/3 they're looking at the big problems, and 1/3.
Good. I'm glad to see it's a majority.
Yeah. And they're very a lot of them are very interested in, well, actually it's very wide. Of course, every now and then I remember 10 years ago, everybody was doing something with Kinect. But now it's so honest.
Everyone does the hot thing, right? It's like, if you don't talk about ChatGPT right now, everybody ignores you. I mean, it's really, I know.
You have to say something, even if it's been said already,
Yeah, exactly.
Or DALL-E. And
all these people clamoring. Yeah.
So now, so I'm teaching a thesis class this semester. We have a few students interested in immersive environments. But a lot of them, actually, now that I think of it, are really interested in narrative structures, the future of narrative. And I have quite a few students who are interested in social issues. How to use.
But narrative is important, because that is how we communicate, right? That's how human beings communicate.
That's very heartwarming. But I'd say 5 students out of 18, which is
nice. That's a good amount.
Yeah. And they're also amazing. I'm very humbled sometimes by my students. They know so much, they know how to code and how to fabricate 3D and laser cut. That's nothing. It's like child's play. And
I know they're doing PowerPoint in grade 4 now. I mean, I'm like, what?
They're pretty amazing. And again, it's on us as teachers, innovators, broadcasters, to insert in that conversation the why, because still sometimes I get students that they're really fascinated by a technology. I said, don't worry about the technology. Tell me, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, the technology is never the problem. It's never the problem.
And it's never the solution either.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me, what is it? Like, I come to the final show, or I hear a presentation, and then I go home and I have dinner with my partner. What do you want me to tell him? That I went and saw this and I felt X, and it was amazing because why? That's answer that question.
Yep. And not just technology.
Not just technology. Because that, It's
That's
there.
boring.
It's
I think
boring.
that personally, I think that everything's going to happen. We just don't know when, and we have to
Yeah.
figure. And a lot of things take a lot. Things always take a lot longer than you think. Like you're talking about, you've seen things are 25 years ago or just now coming to be popular or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. But anyway, so it is time to talk about the future. It's the year 2033. 10 years from now, what's the world going to be like? What's going to what where will we be in 10 years?
That's as I said, it's such a wonderful and such a difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, again, I'm seeing so many people from the humanities, from, as you know, maybe we will have chief philosophy officers. I know
Mm-hmm.
we have many organizations do talk about ethics and AI, but as of yet, I think it's just the equivalent of greenwashing. We're not
Mm-hmm.
there yet.
Yeah.
However, I think that there's so many organizations and people asking fundamental questions about what is the relationship between AI and being human.
Mm-hmm.
We will have a much more balanced, first of all, it will be everywhere.
Yeah.
It already is everywhere. So I
Pretty
don't know.
much. Yeah.
I cannot think any aspect of our lives, from our pets to our houses to cars to education, that it will be infiltrated. But I do, again, I don't know if it's a hope or a prediction, that it will be much more balanced, and it will not be just this hammer that everything looks, that it thinks everything is a nail.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll have a more collaborative approach with, and again, artificial intelligence, I always find it as a difficult term, machine learning, which is
Mm.
the artificial intelligence we mostly have, right? We're teaching, and I think we will have it also, I hope, again, that's a hope, give us some insights on how to take better care of ourselves.
Mm.
However, for that to happen, for it to be true insights and it not just quantify the information, we will need to rethink what it means, again, to be human, what kind of signals we emit, and how we capture those.
Yeah.
Which is not it seems easy. So we need to have a fundamental mindset shift in order to be able to harness the benefits and the potential of the technologies that we're building.
Mm-hmm.
But I am
Mm-hmm.
hoping that as the conversation that we're having becomes more popular or more ingrained in how we design and build things, because I think we have come to a certain halting point with capitalism and how everything is about profit, and without caring about the environment, about other species, about social
Or
injustices,
humans,
or
for that
human.
matter.
Absolutely. I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
connected. So I do think we will have more thoughtful creation and co-creation of these technologies that will bring us a certain insight on how to better manage our internal resources and our external resources.
Mm-hmm.
So, I said earlier, technology is not the solution, but if we all had a much more efficient way of technology to more efficiently manage our energy usage at home, that's great, but it demands, again, a different mindset and a different investment in how we develop
Yeah.
these technologies.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't think
if you ask me, technology
don't,
is there to remove our burdens, right?
yes,
And then let us do the stuff that is good for humans to do, and let the technology do the stuff that technology is good at doing. But we haven't figured that line out yet.
no, absolutely not. And again, a lot of it goes education and conversation and bringing people together to talk.
That's right, which is great. And now you inspired me. I've been thinking about doing some kind of salons, and you've inspired me to do some here. So,
Well, let me know
thank you.
when, and maybe I'm in California, and I'll come and join, and I'll do a potluck.
And I'll definitely ping you before I get to New York, because we can hang
Please,
out.
I would love that very, very much.
This is so cool. We have to do this again, by the way. There's so much more we could talk about. Like you said, we could talk for a week.
Yeah, I would
So
love to.
somebody
We can pick up, if you want, a topic to dive in
sounds
deeper.
great. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So my website is principled-design.com. That's great. On Instagram, I'm Pixel Peppy. So somebody
Nice.
can, it's actually
Okay, I'm following you now.
yeah, right. I concocted before Instagram, when I was still at school, because my nickname is Peppy, and I was playing around with pixels, so it was Pixel Peppy.
That is a great handle. I love it.
Great, thank you. So that's someone can DM me there. It's easier, and yeah. And then my email is despina@principled-design.com.
Fantastic. Well, it was great talking with you.
Thank you
We'll
so much. It
definitely
was
see
a
you.
real pleasure. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you in real life, as they
Yes,
say.
that'd be
And
great.
I'd love to chat again anytime.
Sounds great.
So
Thank you so
much.
much. Talk to you
Thank
later.
you. Bye.
Bye.